Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our HRC Research Fridays. My name is Christina Stancho, and I'm an Associate Professor of English, the Director of the Humanities Research Center here at VCU. And thanks so much for being here. I know that we are competing with several events on campus, including one of our own, which for the first time in history has happened. We have two events at the same time, a webinar on clinical trials. So thank you for choosing to be with us today, and thank you to those of you who are going to watch this recording online. I'm delighted to introduce you to two wonderful colleagues who have helped me a great deal over the years with my own Fulbright applications, and who will share a list of opportunities as well as ideas, strategies, and advice for preparing your own Fulbright application at the level or category you have in mind. So I'll first introduce the speakers, and then we'll take about 40 minutes. They will take about 40 minutes for their presentation, and we'll take some questions at the end. So as the questions come to you, please use the Q&A function or the chat function to post your questions. I would also like to make one announcement for those of you who are regulars. Starting next Friday, in lieu of our regular Research Fridays at the HRC, we are opening the Center for Write on Site. So we are reviving Write on Site. Join us in the Valentine House from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for coffee, snacks, and some writing company to move your writing projects forward at this very busy end of the semester when everyone is claiming your time. If you protect it on Writing Fridays, some projects may actually move along. And if you have any questions about what Write on Site is, please reach out to me. Now on to the good part of this webinar, the exciting part. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Jill Blondin and Jeff Wing, and you've had their bios. I'm just going to mention a few things and then turn it over to them for the presentation. Dr. Jill Blondin, Associate Vice Provost for Global Initiatives at VCU, has a Ph.D. in art history from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And before leading the Global Education Office, Dr. Blondin served as the inaugural director of VCU Globe, a global education living learning program devoted to building cultural agility. Under her leadership, VCU Globe received the 2015 NAFSA Senator Paul Simon Spotlight Award and the 2018 Andrew High School Award from the IIE's, the International, what is IIE?
Institute of International Education.
Institute for International Education. Thank you so much. I feel like I should have known that. Thanks, Jill. Dr. Blondin has served as a Fulbright Specialist to Brazil in 2018, as a speaker with the U.S. Department of State Study Abroad Engagement Grant Program, and Fulbright Portugal in 2019, and as an expert speaker on U.S. study abroad with the U.S. Embassy Guyana in 2022. Dr. Blondin is a 2021-22 Association of International Education Administrators Presidential Fellow and serves as a Vice Chair on its Member Outreach and Awards Committee. And her areas of expertise include strategic budgeting and internationalization, global learning, and of course, art history. Our second panelist is Mr. Jeff Wing, who is an assistant dean and the director of the National Scholarship Office here at VCU. He recruits VCU students and recent alumni to apply for many nationally competitive scholarships and fellowships. He works very hard, and I can tell you from experience, he's read many of my drafts over the years with not just students, but a growing number of VCU faculty, staff, alumni, and community supporters to serve as critics and evaluators in an effort to help the candidates strengthen their applications. Mr. Wing says that when he was a student at Kansas State University, he was awarded a Truman Scholarship, which is a great honor for any student. He was also a state finalist for the Rhodes Scholarship and the national finalist for the Marshall Scholarship. In law school, he served as a proctor at Harvard College on the Truman Scholarship Nomination Committee, and he was a graduate teaching assistant at the Harvard Negotiation Project. Mr. Wing received his Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science and Social Sciences from Kansas State and his JD from Harvard Law School. Before joining the Honors College at VCU, he worked as a negotiation consultant for public and private organizations in North America, Europe, and Asia. A warm welcome to you both to the HRC today, and thank you so much for being here. I think we'll start with Jeff, and then we'll turn it over to Jill.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. And while my bio focuses more on the work that we do with students, which is the vast majority of our work, we have been working with faculty to support faculty candidates for the Fulbright for many years, and probably officially for at least 10 years or so. And that kind of came out of our work with the student Fulbright candidates that we were working with, because we were bringing a lot of faculty, a lot of you, in to work with us in support of our students. And then the faculty would say, and can you help me with my Fulbright application? So it was a very natural extension of our work. So there are lots of Fulbright programs and lots of Fulbright websites out there. And so we want to make sure that we get you guys to the right places. We'll talk about the specialist. Dr. Blondin's going to talk about the Specialist Award in a few minutes, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Scholar Awards. The main thing to know is that you can get confused about Fulbright if you're not careful. And so we want to help try to make sure that you don't get confused. We'll put the addresses for the websites into the chat feature as we go. But the Scholar site is fairly easy. It's just CIES.org, although that's their old website, but it's the simplest one. So it's the one I still use because it redirects to the new website. But we'll put those addresses in there. And I'm going to, with this, turn it over to Jill and let her talk first about the Specialist Awards. We think of those as something of maybe a starter opportunity with Fulbright for many people. And so we'll kind of go from there to talking more about the Scholar Awards, which are the semester or full year awards, which are oftentimes a little more involved and take a little more long-range planning. Especially for those of you that have family and other connections that we would have to take into account for these things. And you'll notice I'm in somewhat formal and informal attire today, since our basketball team is playing in the NCAA tournament this afternoon. I felt compelled to wear my black and gold, but also wanted to be dressed up a little more for this. So I'll turn it over to Jill, and then she'll hand it back to me in a little while, and I'll talk about the Scholar Award. So Jill.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, Christina, for recognizing what an important topic it is to the institution to have more Fulbright scholars. I think that, VCU is a global institution. We're endeavoring to expand our global footprint, and part of that is providing opportunities to faculty and students and staff in the realm of international opportunities such as the Fulbright. So I'm really glad that HRC is hosting this today. I'm really glad, and I'm hoping that people who are participating in this will be inspired. I mean, I think that Jeff and I are trying to provide some help and assistance, but we're also trying to inspire people to think about applying, because I can speak from my own experience. And I will, at least initially, when we talk about the Fulbright specialist, but I also know Christina from her own experience has also had a Fulbright, and we can speak to the kind of game-changing aspects, if you will, of the Fulbright. The Fulbright leads to opportunities. The Fulbright has what we oftentimes call a multiplier effect, where the Fulbright opportunities will beget opportunities because you've had experience, not only the work that you did as a Fulbrighter, but also having that on your resume, having that on your CV. It means a lot, because once you've had a Fulbright Award, the rest of your life, you're basically a Fulbright alumni, and that provides other opportunities. And that I'm not even talking about the connections that you'll make internationally and domestically, but the impact that you'll have. And that's, I think, one of the most wonderful and unique things about the Fulbright is the alumni network, as well as the opportunities that the award itself presents. And I also want to say, just kind of going back to my comment about VCU being a global institution and us encouraging the Fulbright, I know this is part of, I know that we have a provost, for instance, Provost Soteropoulos, who's very engaged in the global enterprise, as is our Vice President for Research and Innovation, Sri Ram Rao. And so I think that It's something that I know that people at the institution support and want to encourage from the research and academic standpoints, which are intertwined. So first I'll talk about the Fulbright Specialist Award, and I'll say that that's of which I'm an alum. I participated in the Fulbright Specialist. I'm going to first talk briefly about my own experience, and then I will speak about the award itself. Before I do that, I want to say, and I believe that Jeff feels this way too, but today's not the end of our presentation on Fulbright, but it's the beginning. And what I mean is that please consider both Jeff and me, consider us your resources on campus for your applications, for your awards. If you have questions, there's no question I mean, if I'm sure there's a question we can't answer, but we can certainly help find you the answer. And we really feel very devoted to supporting applications, looking at applications, making recommendations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as our presentation goes on today. But the Fulbright Specialist, my own experience in 2018, I served as a Fulbright Specialist to Brazil. At the Federal University of Minas Gerais, UFMG, in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. I designed and delivered a 3-day conference on innovative and comprehensive approaches to campus-wide internationalization. It was a conference that I organized, having collected data from 5 institutions in the state of Minas Gerais, and used that data to basically consult with institutions on ways that they could improve their own internationalization efforts. And this, I sort of presented an unbiased picture to these institutions about the challenges and opportunities that they faced as higher education institutions in Brazil as they attempted to globalize their campus. How did I get to the point where I found myself putting on a 3-day conference in front of hundreds of people in Minas Gerais? What was that journey like? I did that in 2018. And I had been on the roster of the Fulbright Specialist since 2017. And so I'm going to, so you'll kind of understand, I'll sort of explain my own process as I explain the Fulbright Specialist Award. And let me start off by saying that I was only in Brazil for 2 weeks as part of this award. The specialist awards are short. They usually range from about a week or 2 weeks all the way to a few months. But these are really wonderful awards where faculty members who might not have, a year to give or a year to live overseas can complete short-term projects with institutions that identify those needs through the Fulbright. And there are several steps to do this. And I will explain. And we've had a number of people who have done the Fulbright Specialist Award at VCU. In fact, recently in January, there's an article that was published about a faculty member who completed just this. But these are normally not long-term lecturing or research or, in those type of engagements, but rather it's a shorter-term project. So let me just walk through a little bit about kind of the information and a timeline. And like I said, having received the award myself and having gone through the process, I'm happy to share both from my experience and also the experience of, helping other people with their applications and working as a Fulbright liaison. So, as far as the information and timeline goes, the step one in Fulbright is that really, and this is before someone at VCU would be involved, which is a host institution develops a project proposal and then seeks approval. And so that's not, that's important, but not really the group I'm talking to today is not really involved in that because that's something that will happen overseas. And you can read about this. I'm not going to repeat everything on the website, but the second step is the one that would really involve faculty members, which is that interested individuals apply to join the Fulbright Specialist roster. So there's really a 2-step process to becoming a Fulbright Specialist. The first is applying to be on the roster. And the roster means that you're basically on a list of people who could be basically called up for a project. And I'll explain that more in just a second. But all prospective Fulbright specialists complete an application process to be eligible for host institutions projects abroad. So you complete this application. There is information about it online, and they have several times a year in which they review applications. It's 5 times a year, I believe, 5 to 6 times a year. So if this is also has a lot of flexibility in faculty members' lives, because there's not just one date. And if you don't get it by that date, you have to wait an entire year. Rather, you have just a couple of months. So you targeted that you wanted to complete it, by March or whatever, but then, something came up and you can't get the application in until the summer. There's a due date for you. And once you get accepted into the Fulbright specialist roster, and I assume people will, and I would provide my services to help you work on that application, including me sharing my own application as a template. Once you're accepted onto the roster, you're then active on the roster for 3 years. So you have 3 years. In my case, I got on the roster in 2017, and I did not roll off the roster until 2022. I think we probably all can figure out why that was the case, because they froze the roster due to the pandemic. So people who were still there because they could not complete projects, I ended up getting an extra 2 years for free on the roster. But that was sort of an extraordinary circumstance. But under normal circumstances, you would be on the roster. So you're on the roster. What does that mean? Does that mean that you're a Fulbrighter? It actually does not mean that you're a Fulbrighter. You are only considered Fulbright. Can folks reapply to be on the roster? That's a great question that Christina just asked me. Yes, if you don't initially make or are not accepted, then you can reapply, I believe, in the next cycle to be on the roster. And these are in different areas. I would recommend looking, really reading through the website, because that will provide, from my own experience, they're looking for there are diversity of projects that are listed. And I'll talk about the 2 different ways that you could then get a placement once you are in fact, on the roster. So what happens is when you're eligible for a project, you can be matched with a host institution one of 2 ways. Generally, there's something called an open project or a named project. An open project is when a host institution has identified a project for a Fulbright specialist, but they have not named a specific individual, meaning it's open for application. And this is in some ways a less common way, because it's not a guaranteed way if you are on the roster to be guaranteed a project. But it is an opportunity nonetheless. So if you are wanting to explore this, you can put in an application and sit on the roster until you find a project that with whom you would be matched with a host institution. This is the way I did it. But there's also another way to do it. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk in all of the details about this. But again, I'm happy to set up appointments with people who have further questions, and I'll discuss this. As far as named projects, the host institution actually identifies the individual in their proposal. And this person may or may not currently be on the roster, but then the person will go through the application process. This is one of the best ways to get matched, because it does guarantee you a match. So if let's say you already have a connection, I'm just going to list something off the top of my head. You have a connection in Uganda, for instance. You've been working with, somebody there, and they have a project upon which they need help. Example might be, there's an small institution that wants to establish an international office, and you happen to be an international educator. You could work with them, and as they submit the project, for review, they would name you as the person, and then you would, it might take a while, but the project, you would be part of that, not have to go through, in some ways, that second application process. If on the other hand, if you are in an open project, you're sort of sitting around waiting to see if there's a good match and if you get selected. And again, that happens. That happened for me within about 15 months of me being on the roster. I was matched with a project for which I was accepted. But I'll also tell you that there were several projects that the organization that runs Fulbright Specialist would reach out to me periodically and say, we think you'd be a good match. Are you interested? And I applied for a couple in which I wasn't selected. So, I'm not saying the first time I got called up, I got selected, because I probably applied for a few before that. I don't like to talk about that. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. It's just part of being on the Fulbright specials. Well, you know what? It's part of being an academic. We get about 10% of that for which we apply. But then there are various approval processes that you have to go through that they'll help you walk through once you're accepted. And then once you've completed the Fulbright Specialist Project, that's when you're considered a Fulbright, you're a Fulbrighter. So I'm, again, happy to talk more about that. And there's another type of award that I am also happy to talk about, which is the International Education Administrators Award. But I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff to talk about the other Fulbright awards if you'd like, Jeff.
All right. So we often think of the Specialist Award as a little bit easier to complete and engage with, partly because they can be short-term. And you can pick and choose. If something comes up and it's a bad time because of your family, your kids, your significant other, whatever, you can say, no, that's not a good time. Keep me on the roster. Maybe the next one will work, kind of thing. The Scholar Awards that I'm going to talk about next, I'll share my screen here and hopefully it'll work the way we want it to. Is that coming across? Are we still getting two screens? Okay. All right. So the Scholar Program is basically a longer term program. This is an opportunity to do a semester, even a full year. And we've had numerous faculty over the years who have been accepted into this program. So we've got a pretty good roster of folks on campus that can be consultants to you, and most of them are happy to do so as well. So these are opportunities. This is actually last year's slideshow for the 2023-2024 program. The new one is out, but the fonts are messed up on it, so I didn't have time to fix that today. So I'm just going to run through a few of the slides real quick to kind of give a high-level overview of this. And then I will say that probably the most important thing for those of you that are interested, even if it's an interest that you have in the future sometime, is to make an appointment to talk to me, to talk to Jill, even to talk to Christina. Christina's been a Fulbrighter. She's hoping to be a Fulbrighter again. And, we're all happy to kind of do that initial kind of, let's talk about what this could look like, and let's think about the timing when it might work for you. We joke in our office that everybody has a Fulbright application inside them. I just need 30 minutes with you to figure out what yours might look like. And I think that's true for any of us. We're also fully aware that when I talk to students, I'm usually talking about applying now or next year. When I talk to faculty, even staff, and some of our alumni that are interested in the Scholar Awards, oftentimes we're talking about a 3 to 5 year horizon, or maybe even longer. But that's good to get that process started, to get those seeds planted. You can be doing things to build your connections with people abroad that might lead to good opportunities. Sometimes that may take a while. You may need to bump into them at conferences or co-present, develop collaborative projects that could lead to kind of natural opportunities for a more extended exchange program like this. And we're also we can talk a little bit at the back end or take questions. We're keen to get more Fulbrighters to come to VCU from abroad as well, both students and faculty. So as I'll slide here in a minute, it'll show you there's lots of different Fulbright programs. This is why there's also lots of different Fulbright websites that you have to be kind of aware of and cautious of making sure that you're getting on the right one and getting the right information. Let's see, I went backwards there. So I'm not going to go through this. You can read this. We'll send this to all of you. I'll just send the slideshow to Ronnie and Christina, and they can pass it along to everybody that attended today, and anybody that wants to get a recording of it. Fulbright is really keen, as are all federal programs, to make sure that we are recruiting as diverse a group of candidates as we can, and that we are as inclusive as we possibly can be as well. Equity falls into this as well, but we do our best, and we are excited to learn better ways all the time to make sure that we are reaching out to everybody from all different backgrounds and all different perspectives as well. Keep going in the wrong direction here. All right, so by the numbers, there's about 8,000 awards annually, and if you read through this list here, you'll see that it's broken up in lots of different ways. We send scholars and administrators abroad. That's the first 900. The 900 visiting scholars are international scholars that come to the United States, usually for a semester or a year, just like our scholars that go abroad for a semester or a year through the scholar program. Then we have the students, about 2,200 US students that go abroad, and about 4,000 foreign students that come to the United States annually for their Fulbright experiences. And then there are also the teaching assistants, language teaching assistants, which we can potentially bring to VCU or any US institution to help teach languages that maybe we don't have the staff for, or maybe we're not sure if we have the interest for, to hire a faculty member, permanent faculty member. And there are about 400,000 Fulbrighters kind of in the alumni network since the program began back in the 1940s. So why Fulbright? It's probably fairly obvious to most people that are in attendance here today. These are life-changing experiences. These are experiences that will lead to other things that you can't even imagine or anticipate now. But pretty much everybody that does Fulbright comes back and talks about how the connections that they've established have led to new opportunities. They've met people they would have never met otherwise. You're just in the Fulbright orbit. And once you're in the Fulbright orbit, you are bumping into other Fulbrighters in ways that lead to other opportunities as well. This is also true for our students. We tell our students, and many of them are afraid to talk about what they want to do in the future because they're not sure about what they want to do in the future. And we're like, Fulbright doesn't care. Fulbright expects you to change your mind after you do a Fulbright because this is going to open up things that you wouldn't have known about otherwise. I think that's exactly the same for the faculty opportunities as well. Whether it's a specialist, whether it's a scholar award, these are just going to open up additional opportunities. And they're clearly going to bring recognition to VCU. This fits into our goal of trying to increase VCU's national and international prominence. And from my own selfish reasons, the more of our faculty that have Fulbright experiences, the more of you are out there actually helping me recruit students to apply for this. Because everybody that has a Fulbright experience then wants everybody else to have a Fulbright experience as well. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that regard. Eligibility for the scholar program, you do have to be a US citizen. You do have to have a degree that is commensurate with the award type. There are some award types that are sufficient for masters, but generally we're expecting people to have PhDs. You can also have professional experiences and artistic experiences. We work with some of our students that have graduated from the School of the Arts and then have gone on to be professional artists. And after they have 4 or 5 years of kind of postgraduate experiences, they're essentially qualified to apply for some of the creative opportunities. And we've had a couple of students or alumni who have come back and worked with us on scholar awards as well. The award types vary, and this is where you have to kind of dig into the website and spend some time trying to figure out which opportunities. And as Christina can even attest, sometimes you apply for one opportunity and they earmark you for a different opportunity. And that's not unusual, but that's one of the best reasons to get your kind of hat in the ring, to get your name out there, because then there's the chance that they may see you as being a good fit for something that you didn't see yourself as being a good fit for. So There's scholar awards, there are the postdoctoral awards, which means that we've got some of our doctoral students who could potentially be thinking about using these as basically postdoc fellowship opportunities, especially if they're looking to have some kind of an international experience before they launch their own research career or their own academic career, or move into a different professional role as well. There are the Distinguished Scholar Awards, which are basically awards that are, sometimes they're like chairs at, kind of an endowed chair at a particular university abroad, where they're looking to bring a particular person with a particular background there to teach and do research and to collaborate with their faculty. A lot of times those are folks that are doing like American studies, which means you can pretty much come from lots of different academic backgrounds. There are some flex options in many of the countries that will allow you to do multiple visits over a period of 2 years. So those don't have to be a semester long or a year long thing. They can be, I'm going to go, at spring break, and then I'm going to go back in the summer, and then the next year I'm going to go back, during winter break or something, and be involved in kind of a prolonged research project or collaboration of some sorts. And then there are some global and regional awards. We can, when you've spent some time on the website and identified some opportunities, we're happy to talk in more detail. These get really technical, and oftentimes some of the global things and even some of the flex things are even more competitive because everybody sees those as things that they would like to do. And sometimes Fulbright is just kind of testing these options out. And so they're only funding a very small number. So when they launched the Global Awards, which was probably like in 2015 or 16, the first year they allocated funds for like 10 of them, and they said they got almost 800 applications or something ridiculous like that. So and they ended up parceling some of those folks out into other awards because they had too many people, too many great applications for the few that they knew they were going to fund. But we're happy to talk with you about those kind of specifics as they meet your interest and align with your kind of future goals as well. In terms of selecting the right goal, oftentimes some of the characteristics that come into play are dealing with like language, country interest, where you have expertise and where you have connections. They're also interested in kind of the relevance of the project to the host institution and or the host country as well. So those are things that we can take into account. One of the things that we know with Fulbright is that the more unique your niche is, oftentimes the more likely the chances that you'll be successful. They're basically not interested in sending a whole bunch of people abroad to do the same thing at the same time. They want as much diversity as they can in every way, including academic diversity. So we're always looking for kind of what's the novel pitch that you can put on your work that makes it different than maybe what they see, in a typical pool of candidates. It's important to keep in mind that you can only apply for one award each cycle. You can only have one Fulbright application in the competition each year. So you can completely change from one year to the next. If you apply and you don't get selected one year, you could come back and do something entirely different the next year. Although I will tell you that oftentimes Fulbright, the folks in Washington, D.C. that kind of administer the scholar program, oftentimes they will encourage people to apply again because they know that your application was good. Maybe it could be improved a little bit, but maybe it was just also in a competition with a lot of other similar applications. And so they're not going to fund them all, but that one could be the kind that could get selected the next year. Or maybe you applied to a country that was just really competitive. And they know that, if you put that application in again and you do some things to strengthen it, you're going to have a pretty good chance of getting selected. So they will give you some feedback on applications a little bit more so than the student award program that we work with. All right. You do need to go and spend a lot of time on the website, and you need to get into the weeds because there's lots of details. And unfortunately, on occasion, what we find is that people get into the weeds and they don't get enough into the weeds, and then they get into it a little bit later when they're working on their application, and they suddenly realize that maybe they're not a good fit for a particular opportunity. And so we want you to do your homework, well ahead of time, talk to us, but also really dive in. We often encourage you to make contact with the people in DC at the Institute for International Education and get their perspective as well, because a lot of times they can point out issues that might not be obvious to us, but might be problematic if you are into all the details as well. All right, I'm going to kind of skip over the next couple. This is when you get ready to start your application. The timeline, though, is pretty important here. We're basically working on a September 15th application deadline. One of the reasons we kind of call that to your attention, it used to be an August 1st deadline. And frankly, I almost wish it hadn't changed, because now it's too close to our student deadline. So all that really means is that if you want my support, if you want the support from the National Scholarship Office, you need to be thinking about doing this in the summer or the spring. Because when we get to August and September, we're so overwhelmed with our student pool of candidates that we don't have a lot of time to review materials at that point in time. So we try to do as much of our work by the middle of August with you guys as we possibly can, and then hope that you're in a good place to kind of finish it up on your own at that point. Once you submit, then it's a lot of waiting, and it can be months, and it usually is months. Usually by maybe around Thanksgiving or early in December, you'll find out if you're kind of still under review and still in consideration, but then you may not find out until sometime in January or February if you've kind of made the short list. Even that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get funding to go abroad, because a lot of times those decisions are still being sorted out, and they have to kind of verify that it's a good match before it's kind of official. And then you have to sign a contract, and the contracts don't get signed until later. So we can't even announce the fact that you've received one until you've signed a contract. And a lot of times that's several months after you know that you're going. And once you've worked out the details of when. So that's a long, drawn out process. You need to kind of be in for the duration and understand that and be comfortable with that. It can leave for a lot of uncertainty for you and your family, your department, all those kinds of things. So those are things that we'll be happy to talk with you about, and we'll be happy to connect you with other people who have worked this through. Because they're the best advisors to you in terms of how you're going to work out the details with your department, with your family, with your colleagues, and so forth. There are a lot of Fulbright ambassadors around. George Monroe, who's a faculty member in history, has been a Fulbrighter 3 or 4 times now over many years. And he has also been a Fulbright ambassador. And George, if you can find him, if he's actually here instead of in Russia or somewhere else, he's wonderful to talk to and happy to share experiences as well. There are some other programs to bring people to campus. I'm going to let you get through those on your own later on. Lots and lots of information on the Fulbright website. You should definitely spend some time there, take it in, figure out what works for you, what you think might work. But don't necessarily wait to do all of that until you start to talk to some of us if you think you're serious about this, or you at least want to explore what your options might be. Then there was, why is it clicking to that now? There's another slide here, isn't there? Can you guys see that slide as well? Okay, so these are just our contact information. Those of you that might be interested in the International Education Administrator Awards, Sarah Carrier in the Global Education Office had one of those in 2017 to Germany, and she is always happy to talk to folks who might be interested in applying for those opportunities as well. And those opportunities are France, Germany, India, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, I believe, are the 6 countries that there are those International Administrator Award opportunities. So I think that kind of covers everything that I was going to cover. I can turn it back to Jill if she wants to talk
Great.
about anything else, and then we can take questions.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm just going to add just a couple of more things that just to say that should somebody be interested in the Fulbright International Administrators Award, that they do have varying deadlines for those different countries. So just be aware of that. And the other thing that I would say, just to emphasize the support that we can provide to VCU faculty is we can support faculty when you're thinking about the application. We can support you when you're writing the application. We can, like I said, assist with that. We can help you identify, sit down and talk to you about how it can fit into your professional plans for your own professional development, your research agenda, and others. So I encourage you, even if you're not sure where you want to apply, what you want to do, Jeff and I are both, I think we're great sounding boards. And I also think the other successful Fulbrights on campus are as well, because they can talk about that from experience. And the one thing that I would add that's a resource in the Global Education Office that I think is really fantastic, and I can help you with this and also ask our team in international partnerships, is let's say that you have an idea of what you want to do, but you don't have a connection overseas. VCU has more than 100 partnership institutions, and you have access to that information with your VCU credentials. If you go on our website, you can see our active partnerships. You can take a look at that online, or you can brainstorm with us, and we are happy to put you in touch with our contact at a university in India, for instance, a university in Brazil, for example, and we can try to identify faculty members, to connect you. So please do not think that just because you might not have a connection overseas at a place where you would like to conduct research or do work, please don't let that stop you, because that's something that we can help you with, and that may be a question that you have. So I'm seeing a couple of questions.
Yes, let's begin. And if you would still like to ask questions, feel free to continue to post them in both the Q&A and chat. Before we move on to answer these questions, however, I wanted to clarify something, because I think this is not necessarily a new initiative, but something that you both said we are trying to be more proactive with. And this is the, inviting or hosting more Fulbright scholars at VCU in the future. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then how, some of us who already have connections or could identify those scholars to apply here, can you tell us how we might help on the one hand, and then the type of support that the institution might provide for those faculty members interested in coming to VCU?
Jeff, do you want?
You probably have more to say about that in terms of
How we can help. Yeah. So there. So there are a couple of things that I think that we could do. If you're considering hosting, which I think is a great idea, we can offer assistance both with the application, with the letters. A lot of times there have to be letters of support.
Okay.
We also need to, there's a host of things that we want to get in place, and we have assisted departments before with this, and also worked in concert with the University of Richmond, for instance, on one of their applications. So I would recommend that you reach out to me, and that we can deploy the people on our GEO staff as needed to assist you with that. But yeah, we're happy to do that. I want to be clear and say that what's interesting about Fulbright is the visa for the visiting scholar would be sponsored by Fulbright. It would not be sponsored by VCU. So with visiting scholars, that's I make that clarification because sometimes people's first reaction when they're thinking about doing this is to contact our immigration services, and that's actually not a unit that would be involved in this situation.
Right, and that's later in the process.
And that's later in the talk. Anyway, but Fulbright will be handling it, IIE. And that's something that's also interesting and can be confusing is even though Fulbright is sort of one umbrella, there are different organizations that administer the different awards. Like IIE is with the scholars, for instance, and World Learning is the kind of subcontracted company or organization that works on the specialist. I also noticed that there are a couple specialist questions. Jeff, if you don't mind, I can read them in the chat. So I'm just going to try to answer them.
Sure.
Someone said, would the specialist program accommodate organizing an international conference in a foreign country? I would say yes, that would, but the host institution would be, so let's say you have, I'm going to use an example, which is my example because that's exactly what I did, which is the host institution, which was a public university in Brazil, wanted to host a conference. And that was something that I helped to organize as part of the host institution's application for the Fulbright specialist. So the host institution would be making the application to organize the international conference, but it could be a named project in which you were involved. So I hope that answers the question. And but again, talk to me if you have further questions. Like I work at VCU and I love to talk about Fulbright and I love to help people. The Fulbright Awards, it says, not for the specialist candidates, not for specialist program candidates, but only for summers. So 2 to 3 long stay. There are Fulbright Awards that aren't specialist awards, but Jeff, that's the Fulbright Flex, isn't it? Where sometimes they understand that you go back and forth, maybe for 2 months here.
Yes. And I think this is actually a good point in the conversation to clarify those things, because the specialist awards, I think we have a pretty clear picture that Jill painted with her word, but I know that there is some confusion about the Flex Awards. And from your presentation, Jeff, we learned that these tend to be more competitive because a lot of people obviously apply for them. But getting back to, I think Simon's earlier question, let's talk a little bit about the, not the specialist, the Flex Award and some of the financial aspects of these awards, because I don't know if people understand what, a Fulbright Award means, how it works for their budgets. I mean, we talked about families, we talked about other types of institutional obligations, but there's also that financial component, which I think a lot of people are interested in. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to turn over to, I'm sorry, I can answer for the specialist, Jeff, but you talk about for the scholar. Sorry.
Yeah. Basically every Fulbrighter, this works differently for every person, mostly because it's going to work differently from different departments and different programs that you're a part of at the university. The ideal scenario, and this has worked for several of our Fulbrighters over the years, the ideal scenario is that VCU just keeps paying you as a faculty member, like you're doing research. I'm going to be focused on research this year. I may be doing some teaching while I'm abroad as well, but my focus is going to be on my scholarship, basically, while I'm abroad. And then the Fulbright Award basically will help pay for your housing abroad, your travel to the foreign country. Sometimes that gets arranged where you actually kind of share your awards so that your department here can hire adjuncts to fill your teaching responsibilities. But we've also had some faculty who have taught courses remotely. And a really cool thing that I think Fulbright is really embracing is the idea of actually trying to teach a course that involves students at VCU and students at your host institution abroad, which can get really complicated based on time zone differences and all those kinds of things. But we've had Fulbrighters who have worked those kinds of things out and made it work and had and then developed something that actually kind of endures beyond Fulbright. I don't know, Christina, if do you have an example you want to share of that?
It depends. And I think I'm at a point in my career when I know what to ask. The first time when I had my first Fulbright, I didn't know that it was possible to ask for things. So to negotiate, to ask for housing. So I was just so happy I got my first Fulbright. Now with my second one, I'm taking a step back. I'm looking at options and before I will make a decision. So I think for faculty members, be your best advocates. Do your research, cost of living comparisons, and also argue that this is, as Jill said earlier, and Jeff too, that this is a great, opportunity for VCU, for, our internationalization or global partnerships. So be your best advocate and try to be as clear in your asks as possible. This is something I've also learned recently. There, of course, different countries offer different things, but we had a colleague in Finland a few years ago who was very lucky to receive housing for himself and his entire family. And some countries offer that, some don't. But I think it's good to ask ahead of time. And the other thing is there are Fulbright commissions in a lot of these countries. I know there are other types of local organizations that are not commissions, but the Fulbright commissions also sponsor a number of talks inside the country, or sometimes organize partnerships between countries. So once you go there, once you know your dates of travel, you can start organizing your tour of the region, if you will. And the Fulbright Commission covers all the costs associated with your travel. So this is something I didn't know before my Fulbright, but now I'm fully aware. So it's good to know ahead of time. Sorry to take so much time. Jill, you had something to say about the...
I just wanted to add about the Specialist Award, which is a much smaller time commitment. But there is, obviously the travel to that country is covered, as well as a stipend is given that is given for the completion of the project. And depending, I think, on the award too, obviously housing is provided. And in my case, that was, just, I was only there for 2 weeks and I was moving around a lot. So that was really, I was in and out of hotels when I was in Brazil. But that's something I think that you can also, it's probably more limited in what you can ask for, but they certainly you are certainly made whole within that. And then that, because again, in your applying, when you do get the grant, you'll work with HR and others just to make sure that your compliance and your, reporting it research wise and things like that. But there may be some, certainly not hoops to jump through, but just some reporting of which you should be aware. But the Fulbright Specialist Award, I think, in terms of that is much easier. And to my mind, because this, or to my knowledge, there's not a dependent allocation or whatever, obviously with the specialist, because it's a much smaller award, or, for a shorter period of time.
Great, thank you for that. There is a question that Jill has already answered in the chat, but in case there are other attendees who are interested, the question is about how can international students who are not U.S. citizens get help from you? And I'm assuming the question is how can they benefit from this program, particularly from their home country, right? If they're not yet U.S. citizens.
That's a really good question. So there are Fulbright awards. There are Fulbright awards that are given for people coming in to study in the United States, which Jeff outlined in part. And so my recommendation would be, this is also something I think that's not shared as much, but the Fulbright commissions are wonderful hubs of information in each country.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes they're paired, not always, but you'll see them with Education USA offices, sometimes, consulate adjacent and that sort of thing. But I know that the Fulbright offices in most countries are very much hubs of activity and willing to help. So to me, I recommended reaching out to Geo when we can, have the appropriate person assist you, which in many cases is probably me. But I would also recommend, as an international student looking at the Fulbright office within your country, the people at the Fulbright, to me, Fulbright Commission people are like the heroes of international education, because they do so much good work both on the inbound and the outbound side. So keep in mind that a Fulbright Commission, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience with Fulbright Portugal because I've worked pretty closely with them. But they do a lot of work. They'll do work both within and outbound mobility, but could definitely answer questions about the application. And VCU has hosted the Fulbright Gateway program for students who are coming. We have hundreds
Oh.
of students who study Fulbright, who study via the Fulbright in the U.S. annually. Who go to different, states and, cities and stuff like that. But usually there are a couple of institutions that host the orientation for those students, and VCU has done that a number of times. So, I mean, it's a really great program for students, but I would encourage you to talk to your country's Fulbright Commission.
And it's critical that you understand that the international students must apply for Fulbright while they are in their home countries. They cannot be here studying already and then apply for Fulbright support to come here. It has to be, you have to apply in your home country. You have to be in your home country at the time. You can be applying to come to the United States at the same time. But you can't apply for Fulbright support from your home country once you're already in the US.
That's a really important distinction.
Great. I think we have time for only one question, and this is the hardest question, so I saved it for last. So get ready, because we have people who do a lot of research here, and who will be watching this. What is your advice on preparing that application, right? How do people write a Fulbright application? How early should they start? I think now the deadline has been moved from July to September, so there's a little bit more time. I know Jeff has read my applications many times. My second Fulbright was rejected the first time. I think I applied for a flex program, and I didn't really know what I wanted, so maybe I knew better the second time. But what specific advice do you have for pitching that application and for the whole process of putting the materials together?
If I could really quickly, Jeff, I would say strategy. And what
Strategy.
I would say strategy. Strategic selection of country. And that's for people who can be flexible, because for some people their projects are going to necessarily take place. But I would think strategically about the country you're choosing. I would also think about I would also keep in mind that Fulbright is more than just funding your research. Fulbright is also cultural ambassadorship, so which is important. It showcases some of the best of the United States abroad, and so I think you need to keep that in mind. When I give people advice on Fulbright, keep in mind that at its heart, it's funding your research, but it's also funding cultural ambassadorship. So you don't want to, you have to walk that fine line between knowing and showing what you know without being very jargony. So I would say coming up with an intensely readable application for any audience while showing that you're an expert is absolutely key after you approach it strategically. Jeff?
Thank you.
Yeah, start early. Brainstorm. You don't need to have something prepared to come and talk with us. In fact, I think you're better off coming and talking to us before you get too far into the process of trying to develop a proposal. We can talk about that cultural ambassador piece and how do you frame an application that is going to be research focused, but is still going to address the interest of the State Department and the government of that ambassadorial piece. And so we'll talk about, don't get too myopically focused on your research. They're going to be interested in what you're doing, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not even going to have any expectations that you're going to publish something or have a collaborative project that gets to the presentation phase or something. They're delighted when it does, but that's not how they measure success. They measure success on how engaged were you with the students at the university or the institution where you were, how engaged were you with other institutions while you were there, Were you traveling to other places and engaging with people beyond? Were you even doing things in the community? Were you getting outside of the university bubble or the institution bubble and getting into the community to meet people and to exchange ideas and to help kind of represent the United States in the broader community? So come talk to us, and then bring your drafts back, and we literally will look at them, as many times as you and we have time, to kind of go back and forth. I've looked at, Scholar Awards 4, 5, 6 times over the course of several weeks or months, and given feedback at each point and talked through, and I don't need to get into the nitty-gritty detail. I'm never going to understand your research per se, but I can help you think about how to connect it to the bigger picture.
Right. And you are also very kind to share previous applications, successful applications. So if anyone would like to take a look at a successful application, there are samples that Jeff can share with you.
Get you connected with the other people that have applied who can be oftentimes just as good of advisors. Yeah,
I realize we're at time. I know people have places to be. Thank you so much for coming here for an hour with us. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jeff. And I look forward to hearing about next year's recipients once this group starts applying. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you virtually and in person at future events. And of course, next Friday, we hope to see many of you in Valentine House for the revival, let's say, of Right on Site. And go Rams.
Thanks for having us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you.